Hey Joe, I have internet weather for this week, last week, ending until yesterday. This slide we have top 10 most probed ports by scan volume. Here I'm listing three specific ports, even though I do not want to talk about 1433, which are at number 1 and number 2. The reason is I'll be talking about them with the top sources.
Okay.
Okay. The first step would be I would be going with the number 8, AT&T TCP. We jumped about 4 places from last week to this week by 4 positions. And then I follow up with 8545, which I always talk about, and 3389. And let's roll with the probes on AT&T TCP. What's AT&T TCP? It's typically one of the HTTP ports.
Yeah, it's like an alternate.
Not necessarily. Yeah, you could say alternate, but it's in combination of 80, 80, 80, 81. Right. This is most likely used. But this is also most popularly used by one of the IoT botnet, Satori Desan.
Okay.
In that case, this is a specific version of Satori botnet. It targeted on port 81 to find for the vulnerable devices. That's why I put that Satori Desan here. While looking back the past 365 days, I think there was a little about last year, from October to December, May time frame, and later in January it's kind of picking up. But if you compare in past 90 days, I think the increased levels are there, but not really significant. But let's see how the scan sources are looking on this one,
okay.
Which actually shows on the scan zips. What this is showing is a number of unique sources scanning on this specific port. For example, as you see in the last few days, like 2-3 days over the weekend, there was a big spike in the number of scanners scanning on this port. That definitely talks about, I think, some sort of new botnet or something, looking for definitely
creating that increment, right?
That increment. If you see about, I think, about 1,000, I think 20,000, it's almost double the size of the scanners we are seeing in the past 365 days. So I try to capture the GeoIP distribution of these scanners, how it looks. I think if you look here, we have about, I think the report I picked up has about 17,000 scanners. As you can see, it's heavily distributed in American regions, Africa, and a little bit of Asia Pac, some Australian regions. Also, the top scanners, I think when I'm looking at the top scanners, like the top 10, most of them seems to be internet scanners. I think they typically do the scanning across the internet, looking for various ports. And they were also in this one, but also there are also other scanners included in it. I think definitely looking for some new or maybe existing botnet with some new vulnerability on this specific port. We'll be watching this, and most likely we'll have some updates with any new information. And what is this one? 8545, we all know it's Ethereum port. We have been talking about this one. I think there's a little bit of spike, but even then that spike actually kicked up in the volumetrics. That's how it's showing up in our top 10 reports. The big spike we have seen is just a little bit before, I think, start of December. And I think again in the last few days, they're kind of creeping up to the same levels. But number of scanners on this one, if you see it, I think most of the time it's happening on irregular intervals of time. I think every 7 or 8 days there was a big spike. I guess a couple of scanners are coming in and they're scanning it, they're going away. For example, we know some internet scanning companies, they have a set of IPs, maybe 20, 30, 40, whatever the number. They all come at some time, they do the scanning and then go away. That is the trend we are seeing with those big spikes. But overall, if you see, I think in the past few weeks, there's a slowly little bit increase in the number of scanning happening on this particular port.
Cool.
Obviously, Ethereum and any Bitcoins or any mining are interesting.
Some sort of scripted mining kind of
I think
operation?
so. I think so. Maybe at the irregular intervals, those scanners are coming and seeing how many are still available.
Got it.
And as you can see, compared to previous GeoIP map, it's very light. I think there are only 400 IP addresses, but they seems to be highly concentrated in our US region. And
so a lot more volume from fewer sources in this case, right?
Yeah, and in this case, the dots represent the heat map, right? But for example, the dots in US region, they are coming from scanners. They're well-known internet scanners.
Okay.
And also the same case with a couple of scanners in Asia Pac region also.
Yeah, it's the chart like this. It's more what you don't see, right? It's not that the locations are telling the story, but just how few there are, and it's.
I think in this case the way to represent is, I think when you look at the heat map bar here, I think red to yellow. I think more yellower. I think more.
Right.
More sources in this case are included in that one.
Cool.
I think you're right. I think even the dot is comprised of many more number of sources.
Cool.
And the third one is RDP, which is 3389, which is typically used for RDP. As you can see, there's not much changes at all. I think it seems to be consistent. But the scanning is happening always constantly. That scanning is happening at the same levels. And only big scan is again how many scan sources we are seeing at that point. I think it is also pretty much staying at the same levels, not much deviation. But I put it there for the representation purposes, how we are comparing with the other top two ports we are seeing here.
Yeah, I think we've talked in the previous shows I've been on about how a lot of these sort of core services, RDP, VPN, SSH, they're really all being just bombarded with scan traffic that, initially it was 23 and 22, but really now it's all these core services where we thought, the attacks might get more sophisticated, and it's I think we're seeing more and more of these core services are really being put to the test, So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I have one comment about that. Maybe once I go through the sources, I'll tell maybe you agree or disagree, we'll see.
Okay.
This is again sources. I mean, there are not many. Last month also I did a little bit on 3389. As you said, RDP is always there.
Yeah.
I was just comparing my notes to how many sources are there at the time here. It's almost there. I think at the time I had like 1,600 plus sources. Now we're about 1,700. Okay. So they're pretty much like 20, 30 sources here and there. So, and that exactly the point you're
talking. That this is really, it's a always on, full out battle for these core services that, any vulnerability, any, misconfiguration or anything that's not patched or, there's no escaping the internet scanners, the recruitment, it's constant. So interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in the RDP case, probably that's one of the first ones they get in. They look for the shares, like you said with your story.
Yeah.
Here we have top 10 sources probing here. Again, not much difference from the previous week. The top one is 445, which is the SMB. Number 2 is 23, which is Telnet, and followed by 22, which is SSH at number 4. And 1433 is MS-SQL. But I would like to concentrate on 23 and 1433 because they jumped up from previous week like significantly compared to others. The first one would be 1433, which is Microsoft SQL Server Port. And we all know this has been a prime target for weak passwords for a long time. This is again last 365 days worth of graph. As you can see, there was a sustained increase in activity or volume on this port since I think October timeframe, and kind of it's continued. But I think at the end of January kind of tapered off a little bit, but not as much as we seen in the beginning of the last year or so. But again, since a few days, it's kind of picking up to the same levels as a couple of days. So about in other reports, on an average, we are seeing about 14 to 15,000 scanners on every time, which are basically looking for these vulnerable 1433 port devices. This is pretty much actually almost spread across the entire globe.
Yeah.
And the next one is 23, which we know Telnet, which is prevalent on almost on all the servers and ports. I think it needs to be, at this point, it needs to be closed up, but still I think we are seeing those.
Yeah. And a lot of time it's IoT devices, right?
It's IoT devices, exactly. I think but Telnet is open. I mean, most of the users doesn't have the know-how to how to basically block it or maybe switch back to 22,
right,
which is the secured version of 23. And again, the distribution of this one,
it's everywhere.
it's almost 50,000 IP.
Yeah.
It took a while basically to generate this graph. But as you can see, almost pretty much everything in US, African, and
I mean, that pretty much just mimics where the network is, right?
Network is. I guess if we can correlate this one with the other 1433, there will be subset of IPs, I think, already residing in this graph.
Yeah.
The only comment I want to do is, like you said, some ports like 22, SSH, 23, Telnet, 445, 1433, and 3389. These are all the very, very fond ports for most of the threat ports, like APTs. I think these are one of the first few ports, like I said, they will target, look for the vulnerable victims, and they try to basically propagate inside.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, like I said, I think these core services, they're not trendy, they're not flashy, but they're just under constant attack.
Mm-hmm.